Hey everyone, welcome to the Ardent Run Club Podcast, the Ardent Run interview, however you want to call it. This is the first episode, and let me just explain what it's about. So before we get into it, this whole podcast, this whole interview style, like conversation stuff that we're doing here, it's basically here all we're going to do is just talk of everything running. So from training to racing, from nutrition to kit and everything in between. We've got exclusive interviews with a whole host of athletes, from world-class runners to coaches, from even up to your casual park runner. But the important thing is, if you tune in, you're bound to learn something, get inspired, and find your fire. So today, I've got with me an amazing special guest. He's a legend in the world of UK athletics and running and in coaching. He's got over 50 years of experience as a passionate runner, plenty of achievements, especially one notable one, winning the Glasgow Marathon in 1985. A legendary athletics coach who's coached over 17 international status athletes, and just like somebody well versed in the sport, writing plenty of articles for Athletics Weekly, and that is David Lowes. Hey David, how are you doing?
I am fine in this troubled time.
Yeah. How are you keeping? Making sure you're staying healthy and everything?
Well, I had a big bike accident 5 weeks ago, so I'm waiting for a scan. Could be an operation, but hey, I'm a lot better off than some, so put it that way.
Yeah, that's something very important to remember. Count your blessings and everything. That's so good. But yeah, David, thank you. Like I said, thank you so much for joining me. I guess I just want to talk about you really throughout this whole process. Just talk about you and everything that, like, what you've learned from your journey of like becoming a runner to evolving into an amazing coach and all of that good stuff. So I guess to start off, let's go to the beginning. What got you into running?
Running, right. It was at the youth club, the local youth club. Previously, another youth club, I'd run a cross-country, first one ever, which I won, but I didn't actually compete again in a similar event for another 18 months. So this is about 10 or 11 years of it. But the second one, this is a bit of my athletes are bored sick of this story, but anyway, I ran it. I finished second, but straight after the start, there was a hill which was so steep, everyone had to go up it on the hands and knees.
Whoa.
So it got me thinking, well, immediately, if this is cross-country, I don't want anything to do with it. So I honestly believed every cross-country race was going to be like that. So I went back to sort of football and cricket, like
standard stuff.
Like kids of that age in those days did. But going back to the youth club, I went down. This was in the summertime, and I had some trials for a county youth club championship, and I was doing sprinting at the time. I had a trial, and I won the trial by quite easily, actually. But the youth club leader, he had his favourites. I shouldn't say this, but he did have his favourites, and he made us run it again because he said I had a false start. So we had another rerun, and I won it by even more. And kind of from then on, I kind of got the bug for running. Thought I was a sprinter, but obviously, as this interview goes on, you'll find I ended up at the marathon. So I went from the shortest event to the longest. But so that's how I really got started.
And you said you were about 10, 11?
Dad, yes, but by this time I was probably 12, 13, which is when I was just dabbling then. I actually took up running properly. I joined Gates at Harriers. But from the very first visit, I don't think they were interested in sprinters in those days. So I was immediately a middle, long distance runner.
Thrown into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when did you realize you were good? Was it when you were winning those races, or like?
Yeah. Obviously, you've preempted me with some questions. I wrote some notes down. Running is different for everyone because if you have ability, well, you've got to use it well.
Absolutely.
So going back to the youth club, I was the best in the youth club. Now, when I went to Gates at Harriers, it took a while to get into 4 or 5 mile runs, but I quickly became the best in Gates at Harriers in that age group, under 15s.
Yeah.
And then, I knew I had something, but at that point, you don't know where it's going to take you.
Right.
So later on in that year, or later on in that season, 1966-67, I actually won the Northern Cross Country by quite a distance, actually.
Yeah.
So I went from best in youth club to best in Gates at Harriers to best in the North. And then, lo and behold, the summer came round, and I never ran on track. And you've got to remember, it was cinder tracks in those days.
Yeah, not tartan.
And for the life of me, I can't remember why I gravitated towards, well, it wasn't 800 metres in those days, unfortunately, it was 880 yards. So I quickly became county champion, and then went to the All England Schools, and I won the All England Schools. Now, that was, well, it wasn't a surprise. I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but from 9 months previous to being not really a runner at all, I sometimes say to my athletes as a coach now, sometimes it's not a good idea to be successful at a young age, because if you're going to go the whole distance in your career, to 29, 30 plus years of age, there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders. So from that day on, there was always a kind of pressure on me, because, every year there was a national championships, whether it was English school or, call them England age group championships now. It was the 3 years championships in those days. Mm-hmm. So, I quickly realised I was a good runner, but I didn't know at what event. And but it became evident that, well, in the early days, 880 yards was my forte. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what time you ran when you won your first championship?
The fastest time I did was 2:03.1, I think. Yes, it was. Which isn't super fast compared to some of the kids nowadays, but you've got to remember the state of some of the tracks, especially English schools. When if you've ever been to English schools, and how many events, heats, semi-finals and finals is on the track, because in those days, the middle distance events, we always used to finish in lane 3 or 4, because lane 1 was generally churned up by the end of the championships. So, it wasn't until, I think, let me get this right, I think 1969 maybe, when I first ran on a tartan track, which was Crystal Palace, and I finished second in the 3 years championships. And that was strange, because it's probably just as strange for kids nowadays. If they had to run on a cinder track, they would find that really strange.
Really
and obviously all the different footwear and stuff nowadays compared to what we used to wear. But I mean, the one thing about running, you can only beat who's there on the day. It doesn't matter what race it is, whether it's a local race, park run, a club race, or a championship. You can only beat who's there on the day, and that's what it's all about. And but I think that English schools that I won, it actually opened my eyes up a lot. It was the first time in a call room, for example, and I'm actually the same height as I was when I was 14. I'm only 5'8", but there was lads in there 6 foot tall, and some of them were shaving, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? But I've always, at that age, well, in my early to mid-teens, I was quite a shy person, but that used to change when I used to pull my tracksuit on. You can probably relate to that. A lot of sports people can't tend to say those type of things, running is my world. It still is, you know, and it's a great sport. It's a great sport.
Absolutely.
It's tainted by a very, very minority. But no, running's for life, really. It's
Absolutely.
And the beauty about it is, yes, I was lucky enough to be a decent standard, but you don't have to be a decent standard. You can always go for a PB, whatever that may be, whether you're running 40 minutes for 10K or 50 minutes for 10K, it doesn't matter, as long as you set yourself targets and go out and try and improve. And that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. And I love that, like what you said there about the calling room. That makes me think of what Michael Johnson said when he was in the prime of his career. He loved the calling room because that's when everybody's really nervous, especially before the finals. But he knows he's best, and he's like, just psyching people out, just staring them down, making sure that he's in their heads so that he can go out and win the championship. I'm guessing it was kind of different for you.
Yeah.
At the age of 14.
I've actually got a story I can tell you about that, but later on. It's related to coaching. It's one of my athletes I used to coach.
Oh, sure.
And I can tell you about that then. Okay.
Okay. Cool. Fantastic. Well, you've spoken about the come up of like how you started running, from not being a runner, joining the youth club, and then winning the English schools and all of that good stuff. You said it took 9 months, but I'm guessing it wasn't a very easy 9 months. Like you had to start training. You had to actually start getting into running far quite often. So when you approached training from a young age to when you came to the prime of your career, what was it like, and how did it change?
Well, as a youngster, you're pretty naive. You only learn by getting tips and advice from maybe the club coach or talking to other runners. Excuse me, I just had my tea. But it gravitates. I think a lot of youngsters nowadays, I mean, people, he's good or she's good. But yes, how much is it down to natural talent, or how much is it down to training really, really hard at that age?
Yeah.
Again, I can come up with another little story when I used to work for Athletics Weekly, because I know how hard some of them used to train at a young age, and after a couple of years, they're actually gone from the scene, you know.
Really?
But I've always been a scholar of the sport. I wasn't super academically gifted, but the one thing I used to win every year at the school because of my athletics was I was always a credit. There was a prize for being a credit to the school, and what you had to do was choose a book. And I've still got them on my shelf. I've got hundreds and hundreds of books here, and I used to, even at 13, 14, I was reading books on science and physiology. Maybe I didn't understand it at the time, but it shows that I was into wanting to know how the body worked, etc. I mean, I would often ask, the coach if he gave us 8 400s, for example. Okay, well, why are we not doing 10? Why are we not doing 6? Or why aren't we doing 300s? And I never really got an answer. But to be honest, it's one thing I encourage my athletes now is to ask questions, because that's the only way you learn. And unfortunately, it's across all sports. You learn more by your mistakes than you do from running well. Yes, I won in the schools, but did that teach me a lot? Well, yes, it did teach me quite a few things, but you actually learn a lot more from different type of races, and maybe when things don't go so well. So, yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And I think that thing there that you said there about learning from your mistakes, that's something that I've been thinking on a lot recently. And I think it'll be interesting to find out, could you give us an example of a race that you've done where you've been like, where it's been like not a good race and you've had to learn from that, or you've seen something from that? And
I think running is a little bit like golf. People tend to remember the one good shot that they're making around, but they don't count the 99 bad shots.
Yeah.
I think the one big thing I learned very early on, and I see runners, even my runners as a coach, they do now, we get colds, bad colds, or even flu, and oh, I'm okay, I'll run. And you know, within 100 meters from the gun going, that it's not going to be your day. And yes, I've run loads of races. Yes, I can run well today. And you know, you go home, you've run absolutely terrible, struggled, and you feel awful,
disappointed.
Well, yeah, but at that age, it affects your confidence, you know. You don't really, yes, I mean, you know you're not well, but at the same time you think, well, you know, surely I should have beaten him, or and so on. And, you know, I mean, you can make mistakes in races. I mean, probably this is more applicable to more elite type runners where you've got a chance of winning a championship or finishing in the first three wherever. And you just get your tactics wrong on the day. Yes, you are capable of winning that race if you run it in a certain dimension, but you don't run it in that dimension, and you end up finishing fourth, fifth, or what, you know. And I think, you know, even as a coach, you know, I mean, unfortunately, there are some coaches out there, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but they think they know it all, and you know, you don't. You're learning all the time. I mean,
absolutely.
Sometimes when I'm down at a training session, I'll say to my athletes, "Well, what have you learned today?" And you know, you get a blank look, and I says, "Come on, think," you know. And but you know, we can talk about this a little bit later. But the thing you've got to do in training is really, really see how hard you can push yourself when you get tired. Because the bodily response when you start to get tired is to slow down, and it's a Kenyan thing, really. They don't slow down when they get tired; they actually go faster, and that's what you've got to sort of trick your body and get outside of that comfort zone to believe that you can actually go faster than before. Because champions, you know, they're not superhuman beings. They might appear it to be, but you know, they've just got. They've got the physical attributes, but they've got the mental attributes, and that's so important, especially in running, because it is, in my opinion, the hardest sport out there. You know, maybe you can argue triathlon's harder because there's 3 events. People say cycling's harder. Well, yeah, you do big distances, but you've got light bikes, lots of gears, you know, and you can freewheel. You can't freewheel when you're running, you know.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of good coaches who've never actually been runners, and I sometimes just wonder if they know exactly how their runners are feeling at any particular point in a race. And you know, I mean, I've been through all that, and it can be a pretty lonely place. But you've got to be tough. You can be as talented as you want to be, but if you're not tough, you've got no chance.
And so when you were coming up, were you, like, not even when you were coming up, when you were in the prime of your career, were you training a lot by yourself, or were you part of a group?
Basically by myself, certainly towards the end. I couldn't really get anyone at the time to run with me. I mean, if I did sort of 20 mile, 24 mile, 26 mile on a Sunday, I didn't want to be turning around for people, because you know, I was running these at sub 6 minute miles, you know. But I mean, it's not for everyone, but I think running by yourself, it gets your mind really, you know, sharp, but it also makes you so tough, you know, because it's you against the elements. And you know, training in groups are great, there's no doubt about it, but I know from maybe when I was a junior at Gateshead, this is sort of 18, 19, 20, I probably trained a little bit too much with Brendan Foster on the track, because we used to do some unbelievable sessions, really hard. And maybe I just, well, wasn't already. Yes, I was ready, but I didn't give myself enough recovery days afterwards, because you know, in those days to be up with Brendan was a big positive, you know. Because Well, it was brownie points really, you know, and but you know, you don't win any races on a training ground. You don't. You win races on a racing track, and that's what everyone's got to remember.
Mm. Well, on that, I guess personally, I'm nowhere near you or your athletes when it comes to actually being a good runner. Like I used to be a sprinter, and I've just started taking up longer runs, and so I noticed that when I'm doing my park runs, I'm running so much faster than when I'm doing my solo runs. And personally, I'm thinking, even when I'm doing a solo run, like I'm pushing myself, I'm trying to go pretty quick, at least for me. But then when I do a park run, obviously I'm pushing myself, but it just doesn't feel as fast, but it is faster. Can you speak to that? Like, do you think where do you think that comes from? Like the competitiveness, or just knowing that you're with other people, or?
Well, it's always easier in a group, especially if you're doing track reps, for example. You know, if I in the day, if I was doing 12/400s in sub 60, you know, it's far easier by yourself, in a group, sorry, than by yourself, because there's always someone to push you on. I mean, in the day, I mean, there was me, there was Brendan, there was Charlie Spedding, for example. So just the three of us were keeping the pace. The pace never ever dropped. Now, you know, longer runs are a little bit different. As I said before, you've got to be mentally tough.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can get your head into a space on longer runs. You know, you can almost run, I don't know, I mean, this might sound a bit contradictory or stupid, but you can actually run 8-10 miles without even realizing it, because you're thinking about other things. I mean, I used to think about beating Lassie Viren on a run, or in later days when I was coaching there at the Athletics Weekly, I was thinking about writing articles. The only problem is, by the time I got home, I forgot what I forgot what I was thinking about. But at least the time, I mean, again, the younger ones don't understand. It's like a 2-hour run.
Yeah.
To me, in my mind, only lasted an hour. You know.
Yeah, I got you.
Where, you know, maybe for some people it might feel like 3 hours, but you know, that's me. I mean, one of my big arguments at the moment, and because of my injuries and stuff, I do tend to do a lot of runs on treadmill.
Yeah.
I mean, I could actually run all day on a treadmill and not get bored. Now, maybe that's just me, but some of my girls in particular, I couldn't run more than 3 minutes. Well, I says, does that not tell you something about yourself? You know, you've got to get your mind into that mindset. You know, and but yeah, that's just me. Yeah.
So interesting. And you were throwing around, we did 12/400s or like 8-10 solo miles or something like that. What was like a standard weekly session, a standard week for you, and what was your heaviest mileage week as well?
Well, it varies, because my career, apart from the younger days, was basically split into two different decades.
Right.
1975 was my best year on the track. It was the year I got picked for the GB senior team.
Yeah.
Now, I was probably averaging around about 80 miles a week, with probably 3 quite big track sessions a week. But 10 years on, 1977, I had 3 Achilles operations on the same one in the same year. And that really wrecked my career. I had to stop. I just couldn't run. Maybe medicine's moved on a lot now, and maybe if I had the same problems, it would be fixed straight away. But I came back, and I quickly realized I didn't have the speed that I once had. So I changed to the roads. Now, obviously, it takes a while to build the miles up, but certainly around the time 1985, when I won Glasgow Marathon, the average for the year was 88 miles a week, but that was the average. It doesn't include some of the big weeks, which were well over 100. In fact, one of the weeks was 139. 139 miles in a week, so that's 12 sessions a week I was doing. So that was a totally different type of training to what I was doing for the track, because in those days, my best events were 3,000. I did 7:52 at Gateshead and 13:43 at Crystal Palace in 103 degrees Fahrenheit as well, by the way.
Flipping heck. How do you run in that heat when you're living in the UK and you can't train in that?
Well, there's a couple of things now. The many articles I've wrote, I think I've wrote 10 articles now.
That's a lot.
I often mention it. When I used to run, it had to be flipping hot before I took my tights off. And those days, we used to train pretty heavy. And even if we overheated, we didn't take anything off. I mean, it's the one big difference. I mean, there are many differences, but one of the differences now I see, even my athletes, they train in shorts all year round. Now, you would never see me doing that. I would probably train in 2 pairs of tights sometimes. So the only thing I would say about that Crystal Palace was 103 degrees Fahrenheit.
The 5,000, right?
It was, yeah. It was, was that 38 degrees?
Yeah, something around that. Something crazy.
After one lap, my tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth and I was just rubbing sweat off my forehead to loosen it off. But the one thing I will say is half the field dropped out that day.
Goodness me.
I've never experienced that before. Yes, I've run in hotter, trained in hotter, but never raced, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. No.
That makes me think of obviously the World Championships last year were in Doha, and you look at the marathon, like that must have been flipping mental. And these athletes, you hear stories of them training in some stupid hot environments just to get their body right.
Yeah.
It's mental what you have to do.
You can half acclimatize yourself for these things, but it's a bit like the Kenyans and Ethiopians. Most of them are born at altitude, you know. And yes, our athletes go to altitude and get the benefits, but you can't replicate what they've got, you know. It's just their physiology. I mean, you know, I'm a great believer in not making excuses, you know, in any level of running. And, you know, it is what it is, and you've just got to get on with it, you know. Whether it's altitude, I mean, I was supposed to be warm weather training at this time of the year, but obviously that was cancelled with this COVID-19, you know, like everybody else's. I think the one good thing about the present time is no one's being hard done by, because it's the same for everyone. So whether you're living in London, in fact it's worse in London, because I coach 3 girls down in London and they're getting the runs in, but sometimes the parks are quite full, and you know, and that's difficult. But you know, whether you're in, God forbid, if you're in Spain, Italy, or on the other side of the world, it's just as bad for them. So no one's been hard done by in that respect.
All in the same boat, That's good. Well, yeah, that's so interesting. I love your approach to training. And I guess I want to talk about like I guess we'll call it the third part of your career, because you had your track, your road running, and now I want to talk about your coaching. Do you approach your coaching with the same sort of mentality as you did when you were training for yourself?
Yes and no. Can I just go back a step?
Yeah, go for it.
It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, this, because one of your questions was, let me have a look. When did you start coaching? Well, it was formatively in 1992. And the next question is why?
Yes.
The reason I took up coaching, and this will sound absolutely stupid, it took up coaching because I was sick of paying to get into Gateshead Stadium to coach. It was costing me a fortune every week. So I got my coaching badge, the first one, which in those days there was 3 levels. There was assistant coach, club coach, and then senior coach. So I actually went through the 3 of them in just over a year. So I am actually a level 4 coach.
Level 4.
I actually, for the wrong reasons, I got into coaching to get a coaching. Well, we call them coaching badges. No one's got a coaching badge because there isn't such a thing. Well, a coaching pass and license and I was getting into tracks here, there, and all over the place for nothing, which was good. But that quickly changed, especially when I got to level 4. And I mean, you see, when you're a runner, things only come by your way because you've got to put the work in, and you've got to think. Things don't come to you. You've got to make them. You aren't in control of yourself like you are when you are a runner. You can give the sessions to your athletes, but once they're on that start line, it's them.
It's them.
And I'm not one of these coaches that if somebody wins an England championship or what, I don't go around boasting. Oh, that's all down to me.
Glory.
I mean, I had a lad recently ran the Armagh 5K road race.
Yeah.
And he knocked 38 seconds off his PB. And he got a little bit of friendly flack on social media because he was wearing the Nike Vaporflies, which are supposed to be 4%.
Yeah.
So I just sort of mentioned to this guy, I says, yeah, it was definitely down to the Vaporflies, 4%, but the other 96% was down to me. But that was very much tongue in cheek. But but no, I think coaching really, and maybe it's where a lot of people make mistakes, and I probably made more than a few mistakes when I first started. I used to try to give some of the athletes I was coaching initially exactly the same sessions that I was doing, and I quickly learned that A, they weren't good enough to do them, and B, they weren't going to be the right type of things to bring them on. So you've really got to sit down and think. Get the philosophy of coaching, not leaving behind the philosophy of running either. The two go hand in hand, but being a good coach, it's so much more than just giving out sessions. It's being a people person, which I'm going to come on to in a little bit because you've asked some questions about that. I probably didn't have the mentality is probably not the right word, but I probably didn't have the calmness that a coach requires when I first started when I first started getting into coaching from being a runner. But I've met so many people, not just from the UK, but from all over the world, and listen to them, and I read a lot, and I think to be a good coach, you've got to make it individual to yourself, and you've got to have your own philosophy. A lot of people, coaches, don't get me wrong, and this is not wrong, but they say, oh, well, we're using Lydiard's system or whatever system, but my system is my system. Yeah, it's obviously pinching bits from different genres, but what I give is what I think is right. And I've been quite innovative over the last few years as well. I like to think I've got a sixth sense. Whether I have or not, I don't know. But I think when you're coaching, as I do, I'm not a club coach, never have been. I've been very, very lucky to have my people come to me and ask them to coach them. And a lot of coaches all over the country ask me for advice as well, which, to be honest, I'm not boasting here. I'm actually flattered that people consider myself of such a standard to give valuable advice, and yeah, I mean, you've got and appreciative of every athlete because maybe the athlete's quite similar, but there's not one athlete exactly the same. And if you just give them a bog standard training week in, week out, yes, one of them might improve, but one of them might just plateau or maybe not improve as much. And but it's often said, is coaching an art or a science? And I think, to be honest, it's a bit of both. But I think, to me, it's more of an art, because most of the science that's available nowadays is of no use whatsoever to a club coach. They haven't got the facilities for lactate testing or VO2 max. And at the end of the day, does it matter? I mean, back in the 70s, even Brendan Foster, they weren't worrying about what the heart rate got up to. They just ran bloody hard.
Yeah.
And, if, it got to a point where they got so tired. Yeah, okay, that's as hard as they can go. But you've got to get to know your own body, that's for sure. And I don't think a lot of youngsters actually know how hard they can push themselves.
Right. Yeah. That was something you were telling me when we met a couple months ago, about how you weren't able to be there for a session, but you were looking at one of your athletes' heart rates and it was dropping in the middle of the session, and they said it was because they wanted to get some water. And then you said that you said something about how much your body can do when you actually think that you're thirsty. Could you elaborate on that, or just remind me?
Yeah, well, again, we're talking about clothing a little while back, but that is probably the major thing that's changed from when I was an athlete to nowadays. Even in the winter when it's cold, if we do reps, the athletes want to drink after every rep. And I'm saying to them, okay, you're running a 5K race, 10K race. Are you going to stop for a drink? No. So you've got to get your body used to running. I mean, yes, in extreme cases, if you're running in hot climates. I mean, I've been to Doha a couple of years ago, and that is hot. And you have to replenish yourself, otherwise, the body will start to shut down. But again, the big difference, and I've written about this quite recently, the big difference between a session in my day to a session nowadays, we used to do maybe 2 miles warm up.
Yeah.
We used to do 2 laps of the track, sprint the straights, jog the bends. We might take our bottoms off or change it to a pair of spikes, and then straight into the session. Might touch our toes 3 times, and then finish off with 2 miles. I know. Finish off with 2 miles cool down. But nowadays, it's they do the warm up, and it's maybe 20 minutes, even half an hour of drills, and maybe an hour later they're ready to start the session. And that don't get me wrong, I'm not saying drills are no good. I'm a big believer in drills, but you've got to make the most of your time, and especially youngsters, they've got parents hanging about. Yeah. I mean, at that age, you don't even think of parents. I mean, the one thing I always say to my athletes, because I'm so much appreciative now, so you're very self-centered when you're an athlete, is officials, for example. I didn't give a toss about officials in my day, but now I realise they're standing there for 3-4 hours and it's freezing cold weather, and they might get a cup of tea, and if they're lucky, a sandwich, and that's all they get. That's why, with my role in the BMC, I make sure all my officials get paid well on the day. And it's like anything, yes, you've got to do your training, you've got to be good to win a race, but if you haven't got the officials, the race doesn't take place.
Doesn't matter. So, exactly.
Yeah.
Man, so good. And so
a lot more philosophical nowadays.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad I bet your athletes appreciate that sometimes.
Oh, I make them, yeah.
Man, but you were mentioning about just like your time in coaching, obviously, and my question for you is just on the side, like if there's a one standout athlete that you've coached, because I know you've coached 17 international athletes.
Well, it's 19 now, but never
19
mind.
Now. Okay. Who is the best athlete that you coached?
Right. As I said, I don't really want to mention anyone individually. I've got a long list. There's 19 of them. from actually 400-meter hurdles up to marathon. But as I said, there's a lot of athletes I've brought up to a standard that they didn't think they could ever achieve. And to me, as a coach, that is what it's all about. There was a girl back in, I think, 2005, 2006. She was always last in the reps, and I mean by a mile. And we kept at it. And I think she went from, I don't know, something like a very mediocre 5 minutes, 20, 1500 down to about 4:41, which for her was like winning the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
All I can say, though, is the athletes that I've coached, the best ones, the ones that's got international vests, they've all been different. And that's what makes the coaching so interesting with me, the mindsets, how to handle them. Now, they've all been pretty easy to handle. Maybe that's one or two have acted up a little bit. But I think one of the last ones I coached, and maybe I can mention the name, is Stacey Smith.
Right.
She ran 4:10 indoors in Glasgow, and she was set to be, well, she would have run the world champs the year later. She would have ran 4:4, 4:3, no bother. But she was, in terms of coaching, she was, and I'm sure she'll not mind me saying that, she was a dream to coach in some respects, because she was old hat. She was very down the hard work route, maybe too much. Well, not definitely too much. But she had a Jekyll and Hyde side to her, and that was sometimes early days hard to handle, but I knew how to handle her, and we had a really good thing going there, and Achilles went, and she just couldn't go through it all again. But that's coaching. The one thing I will say about coaching as opposed to running, you're elated when you win, and you're deflated when you don't run so well. Coaching, you're elated when the athletes when they win or do PBs. But when they run poorly, it is awful for the coach. Believe me. You start blaming yourself. You're thinking, have I given them the right sessions? You know, have I developed them the right way? And but the one thing I never do as a coach, I never ever discuss a bad race on the day. And more often than not, the day after. It's usually 2 days after. It's a bit like DOMS. I just wait until they've cooled down, the mindsets have readjusted, and then okay, what went wrong, you know? And then, but I always say to them, well, hang on, that portion of the race was good, you know? All we've got to do is get maybe A and B went well, but C didn't go well, so we've got to work on C a little bit more than A and B, and that's how I find coaching so intriguing. And I mean, there's lots of examples, and you know, I could sit here and boast about all the ones that I've coached to international or helped to coach to international standard. But some of the maybe the lesser athletes who haven't get anywhere near that, but they've. I mean, I can remember a lad, a junior boy. He ran English schools. He did a PB in his heat. He did a PB in his semi-final, and he did a PB in the final. Unfortunately, that PB was only good enough to get fourth. But you know, to me, 3 PBs in a day and a bit was unbelievable. You know, that's so crazy. There's things like that, and it's. I mean, I've coached so many athletes over the years, and you know, most of them still hold me in high regard, which is good. Maybe 1 or 2 in the door. But, hey, that's life. But you know, as I said, I mean, I've written articles on this. You know, a coach is so much more than being a trainer. You know, it's. I mean, you know, I'm almost like a father figure to some of them. You know, and.
So, would you say that's like the most important aspect of coaching, or the most important thing that you've learned is how how they look up to you and how you like help them better
Well,
themselves?
it is, but I think the most important thing, Tomi, is making them believe that they can do something that they don't think is attainable. You know,
Yeah.
so like that example I mentioned, just
3 PBs, right?
Yeah. But that needs hard work, but needs. I mean, we'll call it coaching, but my coaching, I prefer to call it development. You're developing them, and this period we're in at the moment with this lockdown, they're all training solo, and I keep seeing all these virtual challenges online. I mean, this weekend we'll be into our 5th challenge, and it's going so well. It's totally different to what anyone else is doing, but it's part of the development, because at the moment we're training basically to keep fit, in the hope that there may long shot be a race at the end of it. Because the ones that are track based, this is going to be awful if there's no track season, because it means going straight back into a winter season, and during that for another 7-8 months before track season 2021 comes round. So at the moment, my job is keeping them fit, but keeping them motivated. And I think I've got you on my Team Run Facebook, and I'm putting motivation on there every day. And
I love it.
I wish in my day, obviously, there was no computer, social media, etc. That's why I've got white hairs. But mind you, having said that, I mean, I do get peed off with social media and some of the stuff that goes on there. But how would we coach presently without social media?
Exactly.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
It's great for now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're all been very good. They're calling in every day. I know exactly. I've got them all linked up with the Garmin's to my app, and I can see exactly what they're doing. Training's different presently to what it normally would be. But if they feel demotivated or tired, I say have a rest day. There's nothing harming. You're not really training for a race, but these challenges I've set them, it's really keeping them on their toes. And now it's gone into a league table. So the slowest can actually be top of the table. It's based on handicap, and it's working very well.
Very innovative.
There's some coaches in Scotland using it, and there's some coaches down south, Milton Keynes area, using it as well.
So fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I've got a couple more questions, and I want to go into a quick fire round with you.
Sure.
One of those questions is, you've been coaching, like you said, since 1992 officially is when you've officially been started coaching. Do you have goals for the season, or do you have overall goals for what you want to achieve through coaching or help other people achieve?
Well, athlete goals and coach goals are two different things. I'll start off with the athlete goals, especially youngsters. A good example is one girl last year. She came down from 220 to 213 for 800.
That's great.
And from I'll probably get this wrong, but she was near 5 minutes for 1500, and she ended the season second in the country with a 4:43. Yeah. Wow. No, 4:35. 4:35. Sorry, what am I talking about? Now, pre-COVID-19, I was asking her, and I do this for every athlete, I was asking her what she thought her targets was. So let's say for 800, 213 presently, 210. I said, look, let's aim for 212. Now, the reason I do this is simple, because if things maybe just don't go well and it gets to June, end of June, and you're still on 213, you start to lose confidence or you start to panic. So by setting small goals, once they've attained them, hopefully end of May or whatever, we reevaluate, and then we
Yeah.
say, okay, maybe 211, 210 is possible, you know. And some athletes, youngsters in particular, they set the goals far, far too high. And I like athletes that are adventurous, but you know, you've got to be sensible. They've got to be. It's like the the SMART acronym. You know, it's got to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. And they've got to be realistic. You know, but that's not to say athletes can surprise themselves, because this girl who ended up the season second in the UK and 4:35. I mean, that just came. Even I, as a coach, didn't really see that coming. You know, so that was it was a surprise, but it was a very, very pleasant surprise. And this happens, you know, especially as youngsters. But the worry is, well, not worry, just the caution is, you know, well, it looks as though this season's not going to happen. Or if it does, it's going to be maybe 1 or 2 races at best. Will she go 4:30 this season? You know, and that's the thing, because you can only improve so much year on year. You know, and eventually it gets to a point where you kind of plateau, and then that's when you kind of consider moving up in distance from an 800 to a 1500. And a bit like me, I started 100 yards and ended up at the marathon. That's really extreme. But I was never a sprinter really. But yeah, as a coach, targets are different. I mean, my targets presently are all based around my athletes, what I think they can do.
Yeah.
But certainly 2, 3, 4 years ago, the targets were around, because I used to work for England Athletics, being team coach or team manager for some overseas meetings, which I've had 10, I think. Yeah, 10. I mean, as I said, I went to Doha as GB team manager for the World 50K Championship. But anyone, if there's ever been a better race, it's the 1992 Montreal Olympic 5,000 meters. Lassie Viren won. He ran the last mile in about 4 minutes, holding the inside. Coming off the final bend was Brendan, Ian Stewart, Dick Quacks, Rod Dixon, and Klaus Petter Hildenbrand, all ready to sprint past Viren down the home straight, and Viren ran away from them. It was absolutely, from a coaching point of view, it was textbook, absolutely textbook. Yes, I mean, you can argue there's probably been more exciting races, but from a technical, athlete and coaching perspective, it was phenomenal. Yeah.
1992 Montreal 5,000. Okay, I'm gonna watch it after this because I've never heard of it, but let's see. Okay, next, who's your favorite athlete across all sports?
Haile Gebrselassie.
Thought you'd say that. And finally, do you have any hidden talents?
No, millions, absolutely millions. No. The one thing I've actually spent a lot of money, probably more money than some people spend on a car, is photography. I actually take all the photographs for BMC at the Grand Prix. Yeah. But I do a lot of other stuff as well. It's just a hobby. It's some people have paid for the odd photograph, but I'm into different sorts of stuff, nature and stuff, and But that's cool. At the moment, I just can't really get out and take any decent photographs.
Yeah. One day we'll be able to get back into the normal.
I hope so, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, just to wrap it up, have you got, apart from everything that you've already said, have you got any advice that you would give to anybody that's trying to become really good at running or just make themselves even better?
Yeah. I've actually just wrote about 2 or 3 points down. The first thing is be patient. You have to be patient. It won't happen today. It might not happen tomorrow, but it will happen if you just stick at it. But I think the main thing, and this sounds a bit condescending, but you've got to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, it won't happen. And you've got to set yourself realistic targets for sure.
Okay.
But patience, everybody wants to improve. And I think this is the thing with youngsters. Youngsters really should improve year on year until they're at least 17, 18. They might have a couple of plateau years. Girls a little bit differently because they change body shape a lot more than the boys. But, what I try to tell them is hopefully if they do enjoy it and they do love running, all their best running is going to come in their mid-20s to early 30s, really. And that's when they're going to be at their absolute peaks. So what they're doing at 13, 14, 15, 16, does it matter?
No.
Well, it does matter, but it isn't in the grand scheme of things.
The most important, yeah.
I think you've just got to believe that maybe eventually, with patience, that you can achieve things that you probably never thought possible. Just going quickly through what we've talked about is my first year in running. If somebody had said a year before you'd be English schools champion, no way,
Yeah.
I probably would have said, what's the English schools? So I achieved that. Obviously, being a GB international. My first one was the 5 mils, the Cinquemolini race in Milan, which I won, junior race, the senior B race as well. And that is probably one of the lasting memories of my career, because at that meeting, because that was the year after the Munich Olympics, Lassie Viren was there.
Yeah.
Frank Shorter, who won the marathon in Munich, and John Akibua, the 400-meter hurdler, was there as well. And obviously, being a young boy in those days, that was like stardust in my eyes. Now, the funny story is, many, many, many years later, and I actually mentioned it to Lassie Viren, I was asked to be a guest speaker at the European conference in Pailahti in Finland, speaking on British endurance running for youngsters. And I actually had a pendant signed by Lassie, and I took it to the conference and showed it to him. He obviously didn't remember me, but I just thought, there was I as a 18, 19-year-old, and then now I was talking to him about endurance running, and I thought, wow, so things like that. And also, as I said, I worked in publishing for 30-odd years and hated this most of the time.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough in 2003 to get a job in sports development, athletics development.
Yeah.
Big cut in wages, but that was a dream job. Wow,
Yeah.
Doing something I love. And then that elevated me. I actually got the job as coaching editor for Athletics Weekly. That was hard work, but the amount of phone calls and people I met on their top athletes worldwide.
Yeah.
And the big thing, again, this is not boasting, by the way, this is just to make people realize that they can achieve things that they don't think impossible. I was sent to Valencia Marathon.
Yes.
And I wrote an article on the race. Now, I had to write it in a running context, but also for the Valencia Tourist Board. And I got a call about 2 or 3 months later. I had to go back. I thought I did something. But I actually won the best sports article magazine or newspaper for 2014. And that was football, all the sports, even the bull rings, the bullfighting, and that was a heck of an honour. The only funny story with that one is there's 2 stations in Valencia, and the taxi took me to the wrong one. The weight of the trophy is over a stone. And I actually considered throwing the thing in the river. It was so flaming heavy because I've got endurance runner's arms. It was so heavy. But all I'm saying is all these things I've achieved over the years, and there's many more. I'm not going to bore you with those, but I have achieved things that I thought would never be possible, or even things I would never even have thought about. So the question is, what put out to the community is just believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Don't ever, ever, ever put yourself down, ever. And, you know, just have that strong resolve. And this is just not for running, it's for life as well.
Yeah.
Because one thing I do hope is when all this pandemic's over, people are kinder and nicer to each other. Because, honest, I read Facebook because I have to, because of the athletics, and some of the stuff I'm picking up is absolutely awful, really awful. There should be jailable offences for some of them, and I feel so strongly about it.
Yeah.
Why can't people just be nice and get on with each other, and the world would be a far, far better place? Yeah.
Well, that's hopefully something that will come out of this. But thank you so much, David, for joining me today. It's been a great first episode of this. I'm looking forward to speaking to some of your athletes over the coming weeks. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Anytime.
Fantastic.